gentleman in town. His name is Mitch Ditkoff, and he does this thing called story circles, and they're very special and different, and they're really kind of hard to explain, but recommended. And at one of these story circles, I met this next lady. And the name of her story today is Looking for My Authentic Self. Let's give a warm welcome for Alexandra Trevor.
Since I moved to San Miguel de Allende last year, I couldn't help but notice everybody here is an artist of some sort. Could I see a show of hands for anybody in the audience that's not an artist? Raise your hand, please. 2, 3, 4. See what I mean? 5. I am asked every time I meet somebody new here in San Miguel, which is about every day, they say, "Are you an artist?" And I say, well, I don't paint, and I don't sculpt, and I don't draw. And yes, I am an artist. My art form is creating a canvas of my authentic life. And it is including more joy and gratitude and simplicity, which is very important to me. And the reason that I got started on this art form happened because of events that took place in my life. And it is always a work in progress, I will add that, because life throws us curveballs when we least expect it, right? I got a phone call from my dad in my hometown in Wisconsin, and he said he had just been to the doctor. This was in 2007. And he had been for a regular checkup, and he said to me, with his voice shaking, "The doctor found a spot on my lungs, and I only have 6 months to live." I was heartbroken. My dad was just the best guy, and he was the healthy one of the two people. This came as a shock out of left field. And I went back as often as I could to sit with him during chemo, and he did everything he was told to do, and he lasted 7 months. My mom was brokenhearted, and he died. When he died, she just couldn't live without that man, and she died 3 months later. I was devastated. If that wasn't enough to deal with, I still get emotional about it. My husband and I at the time had a rocky patch, as all marriages do. And we went to therapy and counseling and did the workshops, but nothing was working. And I had a revelation at the time, and I realized I wasn't getting the emotional support that I so desperately needed during this horrific time in my life. And looking back on my life, I realized I got married when I was very young to my high school sweetheart and started a family, and my other romances and my business partnerships, I never got the emotional support that I needed. But honestly, it was my responsibility as well. I didn't know what emotional support was. I mean, some of the women in the audience can probably relate to this, but I was from the generation of the people pleaser person, and everybody else came first. I felt like I had come to a crossroads in my life. I mean, my parents had just died. I ultimately got a divorce, moved out of the house I had lived in for 10 years, and I knew something was missing. I wasn't even sure what it was, but I was bound and determined to find it. So psychologists tell us death of a loved one, divorce, relocating are 3 of the top most stressful things that you can experience in life. And I thought, what next? I mean, what else could happen? And then something else happened. The economy took the biggest nosedive it had ever taken in 2007 and 2008. And all of a sudden, I didn't have my clients, even my wealthy clients, booking their appointments again at the place I was working. So now I had financial loss. I knew that if I rented out my house I could probably be better off financially someplace else, less expensive than Southern California. I sold everything I owned, everything. I had a suitcase left. And I knew that I could not work for 1 year and keep my head above water. And my friends were, of course, looking at me like, I think she's going through a midlife crisis. And I said, but isn't midlife crisis in the middle of your life? I mean, I don't want to live to be 120. I'm not a midlife crisis. This is just a different road I'm taking. The next thing I decided to do was to change my appearance because I thought I'm changing so much inside, I feel like I'm transforming from who I was to this unknown person. I mean, now I was an adult orphan. I was no longer half of a couple. I was without financial income, and I was homeless by choice. Who the heck was I anyway? I didn't even know. So I changed my appearance because I had dyed my hair since I was 18, like every color of the L'Oreal color chart at one time or the other. And I was curious, what is underneath all those years of hair dye? And this is what grew out of my head. I was shocked and pleasantly surprised, and I've never dyed my hair since. Next, I decided to change my name. I was born Sandra, Lee, and then I became Sandy in different spellings through high school. And I didn't feel like any of those fit me anymore. But I liked the root word of Sandra comes from Alexander. And I had a nice ring to it. You know, it was sort of masculine and feminine together, had a nice yin and yang to it. So I became Alexandra. Now my friends are really worried about me. And I realized that I looked like the movies where the fugitive is dunking in the bathroom to dye her hair a different color and change her name so the FBI doesn't find her. And I thought, no, I'm not running away from anything. I'm running towards my authentic self, whoever and whatever that is. I went to Argentina. The second day I was there, I was standing in front of this looming mountain called Sierra Lopez. And it was a big climb, and I was dressed inappropriately, and the weather changed by the time I got closer to the top, but I was determined to get to the top. And when I got to the top, I had such a sign from the universe, and there were 12 giant condors circling above my head. It was 12-foot wingspans. It was just like, I just can't even describe. These were like prehistoric things with the Andes as the backdrop, and I looked at those birds and I thought, I feel as free as those birds for the first time in a really long time. I danced tango in San Telmo with Ricardo, and that was a lot of fun. I learned to drink Malbec wine and appreciate that taste, and I drank a lot of it. I had such a good time the month I was in Argentina, and then I came to a place that I had heard about for 20 years from my traveling tour guide friend, and I came to San Miguel de Allende for the very first time, and I fell in love with it. I mean, what's not to love? But it got too cold for me in January. So I threw a bathing suit in a little bag, and I took an overnight bus to Oaxaca. And I thought 2 weeks in Oaxaca, sun and surf, I'll be good as new. I ended up going all the way across Mexico. I stopped and visited every major ruin on the way. I went to Lake Atitlan in Guatemala, and there I studied yoga and meditation and lucid dreaming at a temple there. I hiked a live volcano for the very first time. And then I went to Belize, and I sailed up and down the coast of Belize, and I went swimming with the sharks. And 6 months later, I came all the way back to San Miguel de Allende to finish my last 3 months of my year journey, which was as much of an inner journey as it was an outer journey. Since then, I have traveled to 18 countries solo, 30 countries in all, and I lived in Bali for 7 years before I moved to San Miguel de Allende. And then there, I learned to become a personal coach so I could help other women realize their authentic life and dreams. I learned a podcast and I interviewed women from all over the world who had reinvented their life as I have. And I just wrote my first book, How to Travel More for Less. And I have a favorite Buddhist teacher that tells us that we all know we're going to die someday, right? But we all think it's like in the distant future. In hospice, they tell me that people laying on their deathbeds have regrets about something that they didn't do, that they always wanted to do. And I would like to ask you one question. What is it that you have always wanted to do? And I am so grateful to be standing here in San Miguel de Allende tonight, sharing my story in the hopes that maybe it inspires one person to live their dream. Thank you so much.
Beautiful, thank you. All right, our next